You've done everything that the books and the teachers have told you to do, but every time you try to play, it still sounds robotic, boring, and lifeless. My friend, you are stuck in scale jail. And the worst part, you probably don't even realize it. But I promise you, once you realize it, you can't unrealize it. And once we get you out of there, your playing will never sound the same again. In this lesson, I'm going to show you exactly why scales are keeping you stuck, and a simple trick that's going to have you playing music instead of just running patterns. And by the way, I've got something for you that I really want you to have. But first, let's bust you out of scale jail. Deal? So most guitarists learn scales as a way of mapping out the fretboard. And they tend to think that knowing more scales automatically means better guitar playing or better solos. Now, it's important to have a good vocabulary of scales and chords in your repertoire. But real music isn't just about running an entire scale. It's about selecting the right notes and phrasing them with emotion, also known as melody. Let's take, for example, a scale like the A major pentatonic scale. Now, let's say you know that entire scale and you can play it up and down, but when you're actually trying to play a phrase, it'll sound something like this. Now take a listen to what that exact same scale sounds like with some musical phrasing. So hopefully you can hear a difference there. I was just applying little things like space, guitar linguistics like bends, vibratos, slides, that kind of thing, just to add kind of a vocal quality to those single notes. Overall, I was just using the notes within the scale to produce melodies as opposed to just running the whole pattern. Maybe you can relate with this, but part of the reason why a lot of guitar players sound robotic is because they approach the notes the same way every time. Naturally, that's just going to get boring after a while, and you're going to be left very uninspired and frustrated, and you're going to think that you've used up the scale, when in reality, you haven't even used a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what that scale can actually offer you. It's just like reading from the dictionary instead of actually speaking naturally and thinking, oh man, the English language is the problem. And I find the quickest way to remedy this is using the conversation trick. So when you think about having a conversation with somebody, there's pauses, there's inflection, there's emphasis, there's all these ways that we communicate outside of just basic words. You want to approach it the same way when you're playing guitar. Here's something I recommend you do that's going to really help, force you to approach it this way. So if we take a scale like what we've just been working on, right, the A major pentatonic scale, we're going to break it up into 3 chunks. So we have the first chunk here, which is the first 4 notes. We got the second chunk here in the middle. And then the third chunk here, the top notes. So when you approach this scale, which by the way, this applies to any scale, but particularly the pentatonic pattern. So whether you're playing major pentatonic or minor pentatonic, this stuff all applies. Just breaking it up into those little chunks and just forcing yourself to just live in each chunk for a little bit, right? And create those phrases. So this way it helps prevent you from just walking up and down the scale mechanically. Like if you've already built a habit of doing that, now it's just like, okay, we're just going to stay within 1 chunk at a time. So we have this sort of limitation. So we can start by making a really simple phrase just with these first 4 notes and this low chunk here going like. And I'm putting emphasis on the root notes. So in this chunk of the scale, the root note is right here. 5th fret on the low E string, right? So that way we bring it on home. We're establishing the tonality of A major pentatonic, Right, so just like coming back to that, you can start and end with it if you want, like if that helps, but just sit there and work through a couple phrases. Just keep them real simple. There's one. You know that one, right? So like, even just in the simple chunk, we can find some familiar melodies that we're already used to, right? And then that just makes it a little bit easier to start coming up with your own. You can find melodies even in small, limited spaces like this. So after doing that with that low chunk, we'll move on to the middle chunk, right? 2nd and 4th fret on the D and the G strings. We can go like, which by the way, 2nd fret on G, that's our root note. So we can go, we can throw in some bends. you know, creating tension by hitting different notes other than the root note, and then resolving it, bringing it right back to the root note. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can approach this, because again, you're trying to not play things the same way. So this approach really helps break that habit of playing the notes the same way. So moving on to the top chunk, right, which by the way, that's our root note, 5th fret on high E. So we can do something like, right? Like, don't be shy with the bends and the vibratos and the slides and all that stuff. You know, you can go like, ooh, that sounded nice, right? I really just walked through like the same notes, but it's just the way that I did it, right? It wasn't about exactly what I was playing, but how I was playing it. That also ties into this whole thing that we're trying to achieve here, which is the concept of phrasing. And just to demonstrate further, we can do the same thing with A minor pentatonic. Right, same exact pattern, but brought here to the 5th fret of the low E string. And then our root notes for this would be, so if we had that low chunk, then move on to the next chunk. And the top chunk. So it's like we're walking through this scale musically. We're not walking through it robotically or mechanically. See, once you start learning these scale patterns and mapping out the fretboard, right? I mean, which is a good thing to do, but a lot of guitar players just end there and they just think, okay, now I have all this stuff mapped out. Now I can just use the scales, right? But they're not actually using the scales. That's that next step. That's what we're getting into right now, to actually get to know the scale and get to know the notes in the scale and the kind of sounds we can get, so we can exercise command over the musicality of the scales, and that's how we end up playing stuff more musically, more music-minded, as opposed to just mechanically running the patterns. And another thing worth mentioning is that the pros don't think in terms of scales. A lot of times they think in terms of melody and also target notes, right? Because playing over chord changes is a very important skill, especially for professional guitar players, right? They got to have the competency to play over chord changes, so they're constantly coming up with interesting ways of, let's say, soloing or comping or what have you, right? Instead of just picking a one-size-fits-all scale and then just running it into the ground. So for example, let's use the A minor pentatonic scale, right? Starting on the 5th fret. Remember, our root notes are here, 5th fret of low E, 7th fret of D, 5th fret of high E. We're going to keep these root notes in mind because this is going to play into the whole concept of playing over chord changes, right? So if we're talking about the tonality of an A minor chord, right, which is spelled out with the A minor pentatonic scale, right, we got those A root notes, which are going to help us establish or imply that chord. All right, but let's say we wanted to move to another chord. And by the way, we're doing this with no backing. This is going to be just solo a mono, playing guitar and implying different chord changes. Now, let's say we wanted to move to a 4 chord, which in this case would be D, maybe D minor 7 or something like that, right? Well, we can find 2 root notes of that chord right here. 5th fret of A, 7th fret of G. So check this out. I'm just going to start by heavily implying the A minor chord, and then I'm going to move on to the D chord. And let's see if you can hear the chord changes that I'm implying. All right, could you hear the changes there? I started off emphasizing an A minor chord, and then I moved my way over to a D minor chord, and then resolved it back to A minor. And I was able to do that without any kind of backing to essentially do the work for me. I was all in charge of implying those chord changes from my hands to your ears, making sure that you're picking up what I'm putting down. But let's add one more chord into the mix. So we can actually find the root notes to a 5 chord, E, which are right here, 7th fret of A, 5th fret of B. And if we were to just throw all those together and then work our way through the A minor pentatonic scale, but really emphasize those root notes to imply the changes, we can get something like this going. So instead of running the entire scale, just target the notes of the chords that you want to imply, and that right there is an example of playing over chord changes. Another exercise that will really help you understand scales on a musical level is the one-string test. This basically takes any given scale and expands it across one string. So if you want to play the scale, you can only do it with one string. It's going to really force you to listen to the notes, and it's going to stop you from noodling, just walking up and down, because it's really hard to do that when you're just sliding your finger across one string. So sticking with A minor pentatonic, we're going to start on the 2nd fret of the G string, then 5th fret, 7th fret, 9th fret, 12th fret, and then if we want the octave, we can hit that 14th fret there. Which basically translates to this, but on one string. A lot harder to noodle when you're just dealing with one string. So this will be great for you to get to know the notes individually, especially if you drone an open A string and then just play through the notes. You can get really interesting with the melodies of a scale like this on one string. You know, kind of reminds me of Steve Vai, you know, when he would go like... You know, and it's very different. The results of playing that same exact scale, the same exact notes, is completely different than if I were to, run it through just normally on a vertical pattern. I mean, it's like you're all of a sudden finding yourself making the whole scale sound brand new again. And if you want to try this with the A major pentatonic scale on the same string, it's right here. 2nd fret on G, 4th fret, 6th fret, 9th fret, 11th fret, and then octave 14th fret. The truth is, you don't need more scales. What you need is to connect with the notes of the scales you already know. So for this last exercise I'm going to give you, it's going to be a little bit of ear training, right? So going back to the one string test with the scales, let's say A minor pentatonic, right? I want you to be able to sing the notes to yourself as you play them. So once you play through the scale and you can sing the notes to yourself and you got them memorized, think of a simple 3-note melody, right? Like, okay, think of the melody and then let's try to play it. So, okay, there we go. So, there we go. Simple 3-note melody. That's got a nice sound. And with a little bit of vibrato and some slides, giving it that like emotive sound. I feel like it's got to go somewhere. Let's see. From there. So. This is kind of starting to sound like. I mean, that's very musical right there. It's a far cry from robotically walking up and down the scale. By the way, I was recently talking with one of our VIP club members. Let's call him Mark. He'd been playing for 20 years, but he told me that he always felt like he was just following a formula instead of actually making music. Now, I showed him the exact same stuff that I'm showing you right now, and I'm telling you, within minutes, he felt like he was playing differently. He told me that was the most expressive he had ever sounded, and honestly, I could see the difference too. Sometimes all it takes is just making small changes to what you already know and seeing a massive difference, sometimes instantly. That's why I know that this will work for you too. All right, so today you learned why scales are actually keeping you stuck, how to break out of scale jail by thinking in phrases, not patterns, how to target chord tones for instant musicality, and how a simple one-string test can unlock expressive soloing with a scale faster than any kind of scale drill. When you finally stop feeling like you're just playing the notes and actually make music that feels natural, expressive, and uniquely yours. That's exactly why we put this together for you. This is a guide on how to instantly solo in any key. It'll help you lock in these breakthroughs that you've experienced today and take them to the next level. Oh, and by the way, it's 100% yours, 100% free. Just be sure to click here to claim your copy, or if you're watching this on TV, scan that QR code. Otherwise, I've left a link for you down in the description box. So go check it out right now, because the sooner you break out of scale jail, the sooner your guitar playing is going to actually start feeling like music.